Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the CLSR. And this is your host, the counselor. Today, I want to be talking to you about something that has a tendency to creep into our relationships. It's a silent killer. It's one that you can't see coming, but you wish you had. And oftentimes, once you do see it coming, it's much too late. It's really a situation of reflection. That's usually how you catch on to it. Oftentimes we go along in our relationships and we're just going along without really thinking or processing what could be going on, what forces could be at play. Maybe we're too busy, or maybe we just haven't had the time to take a look. But if you look close enough, there could be something going on. There could be some harboring of ill feelings or anger against you, maybe, even in your relationship. Someone may feel that you've done them wrong. You've hurt them in some way, or you didn't meet their commitment. See, this happens in couples relationships where either or feels hurt or offended by the other. So they think that the actions that the person has taken has been deliberate against them. So they have a tendency to harbor this resentment. And it's real, it's very real. And sometimes if we don't get a hold of it, it could turn into an ugly monster and end that relationship. In order for you to identify resentment, you have to kind of be real with yourself. You have to look inside yourself and say, have I harbored some resentment against my loved one? Is there something that I had not been pleased with? Is there communication breakdowns where I've kind of taken real personal and I've got at that person because there's something about them that's just not clicking? And you have to be careful with those feelings, because if you can't communicate them and get them out or identify them, they could take hold of you internally. And it will build. And it will build into a strong emotion. And from then on, you could have a distorted view of that person because of this resentment, because you don't feel that they're listening to you. You see, what are some of the signs? I think we have to talk about some of the signs that we could easily tell that resentment is going on, right? What are they? Like, let's say if your partner feels that, you're not listening to them, or vice versa, or you feel, your partner's not listening to you. You understand? It's how you perceive that other person. When you tell them something and you feel that they're not listening because they keep doing the same things over and over, making those same old mistakes, giving you the impression and telling you that, you know what, you're not really paying attention to me. Matter of fact, I've said it so much, I'm getting the impression that you're ignoring me. And it seems like everything I say, you're not really paying attention to me. You're making me feel like I don't matter. I don't count. I'm starting to feel invisible over here. It's like a whole separate entity. And all these emotions rise in me. And I start to feel hurt. And even anger. And it just keeps rising. So this is one way. When you feel your partner's not listening to you. That's one way. Right? Or you just have a tendency to carry on over the same issue over and over again. Right? You're always arguing and caring about something, like nothing's really getting addressed, but you seem to harp on the same old issue repeatedly, right? So what you really meant to talk about, any issues that you really have, it keeps coming back. And it's because you have some unresolved issues, right? The real problem is not being handled. So you end up arguing about the same issue over and over. It becomes a very vicious cycle. And the more you carry on about this one issue, the more tension, the more stress and anxiety will carry on between both of you, right? And it's just over and over again. And that is very damaging to a relationship. when you keep harping on the same thing over and over. And it's because somebody has some unresolved issue that they cannot get over, or you're not acknowledging as that other party, right? Or it could be also as well some of the times if you're always trying to find fault, right, in the other person. Doesn't matter what they're doing, you're picking at them, you're carrying on, you know. But you say one thing, but you show them that you mean another, right? So you act like you want to get along with that person, but at the same time, you're nitpicking. You can't really be that whole person to meet them halfway or take ownership. You just keep fixating on these little things that that person's doing. And no matter how hard they try, they, number one, can't feel that they can get over. So you keep finding fault in that other person. And that's when, you know what I mean, it's gotten to that point where you realize, whoa, when you look at it, you could actually say, hey, this is one of the signs and the symptoms. I'm actually showing some resentment here. I do admit, and you do. A lot of us do. We know, like, why do I keep getting at this person? Like, what is it about them that I keep going at them about? Like, why can't I stop myself? And consciously, we say that to ourselves because we know that sometimes there's little things that we dig at, and it doesn't matter what it is. It could be, but it seems to be that area, and it becomes that focus, our focus. We tend to find that focus, and what we do is, if we can't resolve, and this is what we talk about, unresolved issues. That's where this resent comes from, when we have these unresolved issues. And you could tell that somebody has unresolved issues the moment they keep nitpicking at you all the time. They're on you, on you, on you. You gotta even, like, see, this is where people don't do. What they don't do is they don't try to resolve these issues because they want to avoid conflict. Most of us are taught in society to avoid conflict, right? It scares the hell out of many of us. It really does. We would run and jump over a 20-foot fence before we deal with it. But see, this is what happens, and this is an indicator. So when somebody's picking at you, like, you can go back and forth, as many people do, right? You pick on me, I pick at you, and it just keeps going back and forth. But the real truth of the matter is that, there's something that's unresolved. And you might have to go to the wall with it. You could try to talk it out or deal with it, but it's a sign that there's something wrong and that there's some resentment going on, and this person's not letting up. And they just keep picking at me. So you see that even in relationships, and sometimes that creates a great divide in a relationship because that other person's picking, and basically the other person's like, listen, you know what? They run from it. So this drags it out and it gives the other person power. But the truth of the matter is that is something that it's a sign that it has to be dealt with. It's an unresolved, but that could lead to resentment, right? Even if the incident was small and you might not even intended for it to happen, but this person continuously carries on about something, you know what I mean, and you just feel, you know what I mean, you don't feel powerful, you feel powerless if somebody's doing that to you. So could you imagine how the other person's feeling? So when they're feeling that and they're on the receiving end of that, what happens over time? That's why you have to watch it. What does that say? Don't bite the hand that feeds you. Be careful with that stuff. But my point is, people get resentful. You understand? If you're working with somebody and you're tearing them down, to me that applies in that area too, right? You don't want to really do that because that person's going to resent you. Watch what you say and watch what you do. But when you find that, you act like you want to do one thing, but you're finding fault in others, you got to ask yourself, how genuine are you being? Right? So that's a sign. And the other is this passive aggressive behavior. You know it. See, passive aggressive people, as we talked about, are those individuals that are aggressive. They're just passive aggressive. Instead of confronting something right up, they do everything that they can to avoid it. See, couples are very famous at doing that. See, when they have an issue that they have to deal with, instead of dealing with the issue, they avoid it, and then they get into these battles. And then they become passive aggressive, and they're sarcastic, they're vengeful. They could be downright mean to each other. And believe it or not, this could get a lot off their shoulders. Like, it could release a lot of stress. It could dial down some of the pressure. However, you got to be careful, because it doesn't actually resolve the problem. And so this person becomes, because this banter and back and forth, people become resentful of one another. And it plays heavily on the relationships. And it's all about trying to what? Identify what the issue is. And if you're not, and you're avoiding these issues, then you can get yourself into these situations where people become resentful. And then you don't know how that's going to play out later on down the road. And often it does. You know what I mean, ladies. If you're out there, right, you got some power in your hands, like, withholding some affection, some intimacy. That's a big one too. When you got that power, if you wield that power, that could drive a man insane. It could get his brain all hyped up and get him into a fluster. And you don't really want to do that. But that's a way. You can tell someone could be resentful. Could have been something I said or something I didn't do. See, that's the funny thing. We don't look at how these things will impact us, but they do. They do. They think about everything. And actually, their memory is very good. Matter of fact, they very rarely forget women. And so, if you might have forgotten, slipped your mind, they might have some resentment going on, so they might start holding some affection back, right? Some intimacy. Very subtle hints, like no, that we don't like it. I don't say. See, then we can become resentful of them. Like, what do you think you are? Who do you think you are? And what do you think you're doing? I think I'm entitled. Well, if they say no, we might resent them. And men can turn into babies. Right there in front of your face. And you know it. And they know it. They know they got the power. Right? They know they got the power. So, right there, I could get my ego hurt. And next thing you know, I can resent them for that. Thinking I'm entitled. And also I would like some. But the truth is, somebody could be playing that game. So you got to look at what you've done or what you said or what you didn't do recently and how you could work it out. See, these are symptoms and signs, right, of this issue of resentment. You see, once resentment gets a hold of us, that other person starts to look different. I'm not impressed anymore. I don't see that person in favor. My perception of them has drastically reduced. It's something that I might feel I lost inside of me for them. And maybe the attraction is just not there. Starting to fade away. And whether intentionally or unintentionally, we end up avoiding each other. And, and the longer it's worse. The longer you go off, you don't mess with each other. You don't touch each other. You're just avoiding each other. Sometimes it could turn to weeks. For some people, it could turn to months. Like, the longer you put it off, the worse. And then the resentment builds up. And that when that person feels, hey, what's going on here? And then that person could resent so much that not only did they not forget what happened, they held on to what happened, and they held on to it so bad that they can't give it up. So when you try to change their mind, they've gripped onto it that time that you've been away or not given any sort of affection or any attention. You both avoid each other, and next thing you know, it's like you don't know each other anymore. Right? It's like you get angry, and that resentment kicks in. And instead of being rational and meeting that person halfway, that anger kicks in. And that anger says, I'm right, you're wrong. Or I don't care really what you say. Oh, you should know better this. We're not really understanding. We're not really communicating the way that we should be communicating. And I don't think you appreciate me. And I don't respect it. I think that I put in so much work for this relationship. And you don't see eye to eye. And the longer this happens, the worse it is for relationships. So this resentment, you got to watch it when it comes to time. People think time heals all wounds. Be careful, right? Time could close off some things too. That's the thing about time. It can open up some new areas, time, right? New possibilities, new options, all kinds of things could happen. But the point is that these are things that we have to be mindful of, right? I think you have to try to find your way back. You don't let it drag on too long, because that's changed relationships, right? And what about your feeling on the relationship? See, that's another thing. How you actually get into this feeling about this relationship. Like, do you feel that this situation that you're in is hopeless? Is it something that you feel cannot be repaired? And if you don't feel it can be, that's when this resentment could kick in and build up, right? You might have lost that feeling, for that person. And you might feel the situation is a no-go. There's no way that will ever be the same again. There's just no solution to this problem. And you might feel that, you'll always be in this situation and things don't look like they're going to change no matter what you do. See, because once you go to that level, right, you're making up your mind. No one has to say anything to you. It's just once that hits your mind where you feel it's a hopeless situation, it doesn't matter what any psychiatrist or anyone's going to tell you, you're there. So once you've convinced yourself, that's the strongest. Once you've convinced yourself that there's nothing that you could possibly do to salvage the situation, then it's not relevant to you anymore. It's not significant at all, right? So how could this start to show up in the relationship? Well, just when you don't want to acknowledge important dates, like anniversaries or birthdays or, first meets, whatever. These are signs that it's getting in there when you're not paying attention to these things. And that person will pick up on that you're not valuing them and the relationship's not there. And you could be on that receiving end where you're just like, listen, you know what? As far as I'm concerned, I got to move on. This is not working for me. And, and it's because you don't feel there's any sort of connection anymore. The spark is gone. And only you can decide what has caused this to get to this point. And in the end, you're going to decide if you really want to work on it. But once resentment really kicks in and gets a hold of you, it depends on how many things have occurred that have led you to this point before like how many things did you not address along the way? How many times did you have avoided or you tried to address it, but the other person's avoid? Because, see, when you're trying to, it's not always you not trying to address issues. You could be a willing partner, but you might be with somebody who's not. They might not want to be trying, right? And you know that. Like, if you care about somebody deep down inside and you're trying to give your all, and then you have somebody that just doesn't seem that they really care. Maybe they lost the spark. But basically, if you've tried everything that you could, you might go, it's a hopeless situation. Because once you start bending over backwards to get that other person to see things your way, the issue becomes when you do it so often that you figure, wait, is this something that really a relationship should really be about? Because in the end, I believe that most people want to think about balance, like their fair share of the relationship, right? Their responsibilities, at least balancing it out as much as possible can be. That's what I think most people want. So if they feel that they're giving and this person's not giving at all, once they even have that, then they start to resent as well. Because they're like, wait, I'm giving all this and I'm in a relationship and this person's not giving. And I mean, I don't want to be in a relationship where I got to do this all the time to straighten this person out. So the situation could be hopeless on both ends. So like I said, all it really takes is one person to have that attitude. And that's why relationships take work. A lot of people don't think relationships take as much work, but they do. You have to think, you have to educate, even on your relationship. Just can't go. They're very complex, right? As situations change, people change, right? It goes back and forth, up and down, all around. It's just ever changing. So we always have to kind of learn a little bit about relationships and ourselves. And the more you learn about yourself, the better you're in tune with, your relationship. Because studying about people is essential to be in a relationship. People think it is. Oh, we just know. Today, I think we owe it to ourselves, if we're looking to have lasting, committed relationships, to do our work. Apply it just like you do in your job. Like, just show that amount of commitment. That's the one thing the world may need, is a little bit more stability, right? For some of the people out there, they might need it. Just a little bit more stability so that we can communicate with each other and try to understand each other. That's all. All this running around going on, you got to have a very positive outlook. And for you to do that, it takes work. You got to believe. You got to work on things. So if people are seeing a hopeless situation in front of them, there's going to be resentment if they don't think that things are going to change, right? Period. And the detachment I'm talking about, it happens over time. It's a very difficult time in the relationship. See, but then as you withdraw from your relationship, your availability, you make yourself less available, right? It's just, it drastically negatively impacts your relationships. And see, even at that point, I even recommend that instead of going through all that, take a short little break and then get some time away and think, do some processing. Just, visit a family member's house or something for a weekend, get some perspective, take some time out, and speak with people. See, that's a good thing too. I recommend. It's so important to have like friends and family that you can kind of, break it up with and kind of vent to sometimes periodically, because partnerships, they take work, but you still need breaks. You do. You need different perspectives. Just be positive with it. Get a break and make sure you find a good listening ear, not a telling ear. Because if you have a strong person who's going to see, this is something that you have to remember too. Because you think the resentment could just be with you. But no, just think if you go to a friend's house and you want to talk to them about your relationship. Because we all take these short breaks as things are going on, right? Our confidant, right? However, the confidant is going to talk in your ear, and depending on their motives, that talk could be positive or it could be negative. Especially if it's a girlfriend that you've been with, you grew up with, and she never liked him anyways. So you go in there to confide in her, and she's speaking in your ear about things you don't want to hear, and you already had it clear in your mind, but when you get to your friend, right, you be careful. You got those ones that'll even talk smooth in your ear, like, yeah, honey, and then starts throwing things in. So when you do go and you talk with people, just make sure that you have some confidence and that you're going with the mindset that you really want to work this thing out. You can vent all you want, but you're really trying. You're not just going there to vent and come down on, because friends will go in that direction, because see, friends want to be your friends, right? And a lot of times, if you have any good friends, the way you keep friends is you tell friends things that they want to hear. And that'll be the first thing that'll happen in your relationship. It's true. Friends, you want to have some good friends. I'll tell you right now. How do you have good friends? You know how you have good friends? Tell friends things they want to hear. And they're going to do the same thing to you. They pick up on it. It's something that we do. It's the little tit for tat game we play. It's like patty cake, right? We do this game, and it's a good thing for a lot of people. It works. They understand it, and it's a good exchange. Beautiful, right? But be careful, because that person can talk in your ear, saying things that, they think they're supporting you, but on the other end, it ends up on its ear, and it's not good. So you have to have some confidence when you're talking about it, right? So you make sure that that person that you're talking with is going to be that supportive person, right? They're not just pushing you. And it depends how vulnerable you are. See, if you get into too of a vulnerable situation. Like you're too vulnerable, whereas you're just open and you just had enough, and you don't care anymore. And that's a big word too. I don't care anymore. That's one that if you have that I don't care anymore attitude, be careful. That's a dangerous word. Because the more you say it, see, people don't understand that the words that come out of your mouth, they go through your brain and your brain reacts. It's like this thing, right? It's like a voice that tells you things. See, your words are powerful. But your words, you got to put them in your mind and let your mind process these words. It has to come out. And when it does, right? When these words start coming through your mouth, you're in trouble, because then that means you're ready to act, really. Because you're like, some people say things and then they're very verbal and it comes out when people hear it. And it's like, whoa, you give it, like, if you listen, you hear it. What a lot of people are thinking coming through their mouth, through their frustrations, whatever, you'll see. Be the good observer, right? But be careful of the negativity you're bringing. Be around people who are positive. That's why I say, when you go to a confidant, right, or someone you can confide in, make sure they got that positive thing. They kind of encouraged your relationship. You get to make the decision on how it is that you want to be in there. But be careful, because that person, right, if they say, even if they're saying things in the relationship, if you transfer what you're confident saying to your partner, which some of you slip up and do, you go to your partner and say, yeah, we had a talk with my friend said, well, then what happens? Your partner ends up resenting who? That third person, right? That friend of yours that you confided in, because you're translating what they said, because you were always avoiding this issue. So now when you got to come clean and talk with your partner, right? Your partner ends up not liking that friend. And see, that right there is also pressure on a relationship, because when your partner is not getting along with your friend and they resent your friend for some input, even though you were just going there to talk, you have to keep the two separate. You know what I mean? You got to have a confident talk to them, but be careful, because transference happens through people easily. And that works on the relationship. But there's resentment that could come through third party access as well, just on their involvement. So be careful who you involve, right? And also, it won't just be your partner resenting your friend. If that friend of yours, right, says some things, you're trying to come with this attitude, you want to make it work with your partner, right? And your good friend is saying some things that you ain't really jiving with, right? It don't make sense to you. Don't we know there's bias in every relationship, but if it hits you the wrong way, you're gonna resent them a little bit, right? And then you're gonna lean back towards your partner a little. Be careful. Sometimes that happens too. That's the part they don't really talk about. That bounce factor, right? You know, where that friend of yours, you done confided in them so much, and then all out of all these conversations, something comes up that they just crossed that line, and you went, no, I like my partner, no, you tripped up, and then you resent them. So be careful how much you reveal when you talk in those conversations, because resentment, and not just in partnerships, in friendships, once it gets in there, right? It's a big influencer. I call it quiet resentment. And that's what this podcast is called. Quiet resentment. Because it creeps in there. Very destructive at times. But it creeps in there. You see, you can expect a lot of resentment in relationships. Is when people don't understand what are some of the causes. See, that's what we have to do. We have to do the ABCs. Right? The antecedents, things that happen that lead up to this, the behaviors, what they're exhibiting, and the causes. So I always go CBA. Let's talk about the cause. What's causing this thing? Why is this resentment creeping into my relationship? How does it get in? How does it open that door and show its face? How? Well, I'd say that you have to take responsibility in your relationships. You got to make sure that you have a balanced relationship. It can't be a one-sided relationship. See, resentment comes in when you have a one-sided relationship. And some of you do it too because you think you're trying to be good to your partner. Right? I've seen it. I've seen that happen. See, you could be one of those ones that turns around and likes to do things for your partner all the time, frequently. Like something as simple as make them breakfast all the time, right? Make them breakfast all the time. You're good to them. They can count on you. You're so sweet. You're so wonderful. And it's just something you really like to do. You enjoy it. And it's a pleasure for you because it feels good for you to do for someone else. However, the problem becomes is that when you do it so much and it seems like that's all you do for them, and when you expect them to do it for you, that becomes a major problem. That is an issue because you're not reciprocating that action in your relationship. So you feel ripped off. Things aren't right. I'm disappointed. I got to get some satisfaction out of this because why am I doing everything? And then when it comes to you doing it for me, there's a problem, right? And be careful because when people say, no, it's okay, I got to be careful with that statement too. Because that's part of that one-sided relationship, right? Do your part. Make sure you balance it out. Even when they say, no, too much, kind of, help them out a little bit. Understand about balance, And we so often get caught into these routines. And we don't even, sometimes we're so used to being treated this way, we don't think there's nothing wrong with it. But be careful because that one-sided relationship, I do it all for you, but you don't do it all anything for even once or twice when I ask. And then that resentment comes in. And it doesn't just have to be in your relationship with your partner. It could be your kids too, right? You driving your kids here, you taking them to these sports events, picking them from school, making sure they're eating, doing all these things. And then when you ask them to go and do the dishes, you get a whole lot of mouth talk back. Well, easily you could resent them for that because you're like, wait a minute, there's a whole lack of appreciation. And when you do that, you don't like them. See, people don't think that they can't like their kids. There's times when you won't. Nothing has to be absolute. But you love your kids, no doubt about it. But are there times you're not going to like those kids? Yeah, there are times. Right? So you got to be careful that you're not getting the reciprocation, that you're doing that one-sided relationship. But also take ownership if you are doing. It's easy to get caught up into, I want to do for you because I feel good. And then when they, oh no, don't worry, it's okay. No, I'm fine. No. Watch out for those people because those are the ones that say it's okay. And what happens? They become passive aggressive. So those one-sided relationships, that's one big reason why this resentment gets in to all different types of relationships because it becomes one-sided. So and make sure that you're not on the other end too where you're taking and barely giving because that person's going to resent you. I know something that gets into my relationship that has really caused some problems is when when I have failed to understand that to coexist in this relationship, I have to adjust from time to time. And sometimes if I lack this adjustment in the sense that if I ignore or dismiss my partner for things that really matter to them, and even if I get down on them about it, or if I'm complaining about things that really they value, they're going to harbor resentment. And that's not hard to understand that. Understanding that you're working together in a relationship, we have to do our best to value each other and at least acknowledge, because it's so easy for us to get into ourselves and our wants and our needs. Sometimes your partner can have something you really don't like. However, if you dismiss it off, too many of those dismissals lead to resentment when the person is not being heard or they feel that they're being ignored. Or you're being dismissive. And sometimes they'll say it, hey, you're being dismissive. And then you get defensive. And then it goes back and forth. But then if you shut the person down, especially if you are in that power role in a relationship. Now, when I talk about a power role, it's not a role that is maybe going on. It's just maybe there's a more vocal person who has sustained power or who feels the need to control in the relationship. If they're in that relationship and they know they have the power and they have a partner who's kind of adhered to that power and kind of not asserted their own power. So they are listening to you all the time. And then when they do present things of importance, which may not be all the time, you might dismiss them because you're so used to being powerful in that relationship or exerting your power over the relationship. Not necessarily that you are the most powerful, but you're exerting this power. See, we both have power, but how you yield it, if at all, makes a big difference. So if you're yielding this power over your partner, and when they come to you to discuss anything that is of important that they value, and you dismiss it, right, or ignore them, then you're going to see resentment brewing. And, because there are certain statements that we make and we believe that are so destructive to our relationships. And it's true. And you know it. And one of those statements is, oh, this person, they love me so much, they can't live without me, they'll never leave me. And next thing you know, they're gone. I said it. Next thing you know, they're gone. And some of you are thinking, counsel, what do you mean they're gone? No, my partner's right here. No, I'm not talking about gone physically. I'm talking about gone physically and sometimes gone mentally, right? They might be physically present with you, but mentally they're with someone else until they get physically with someone else. See, the thing about what people don't understand a lot of times in a relationship, especially with women, is you can get them physically, but to keep them, you got to have work with them physically and mentally. See, they could be attractive, but you got to mentally gear up. Like a lot of them will run just like men, but a lot of that intellect has to be part of that game. So if they're with you, they're with you. But if they're going to move on you, more than likely it's going to be because they thought about it and actually it was the best decision for them. They ain't just run it most times, right? So you can say it's physical, this, that. No, but if you lose your partner mentally and physically, you just lost. And I mean, hey, it might be for the better. Who knows? Sometimes you can do something about it. Sometimes you can't. But what I'm saying is, I mean loss. So some stay. Some stay in a relationship when they sit there with you, but they're gone mentally elsewhere, right? And they're just there, right? And they just play the role. And some people this is what's really scary. There are some people in relationships that don't care. As long as they're getting their power, they're being listened to or attended to. They're in a relationship and it matters to them. They don't care what the other person says. It's sad, but it's true, and it happens out there. And if you're in that relationship, then you gotta look at it, because it's each to its own. But how you deal with your relationship, you have to think about your relationship every once in a while. You have to reflect on it. You have to fight sometimes. Sometimes you have to talk. Sometimes you have to talk louder. Sometimes you have to talk more frequently. But the point is, it's work. And when you think that you own something, you don't own anybody, right? So interest, like I said, when the person's with you, they could be with you, but they could be also not with you, And it doesn't mean because they're with you physically, they're with you. So you have to remember, somebody cognitively could have gotten their interest. That's what I mean, right? They related with somebody else because you were at that point where you were only listening to yourself, or you just stopped caring, so you dismissed them. You didn't see things that they valued, and you lost out. And you wonder why it changed. Right? And some people don't wonder why it's changed because they purposely do that so that the person can move on. It's true. Right? Some people know what they're doing. The lack of adjustment is purposely done. They don't want to adjust to what that person is trying to say or value. So it ends, and that's just, they don't care. They're about themselves. That's all they don't want the relationship anymore. So some people actually use that as a strategy. And then but the majority of people don't. The majority of people are just going on, getting that selfish. That's why I said people are selfish. They're getting that attention all the time. So they don't want to adjust. And they wonder where the resentment comes in. And you can see it in people. I've seen it in relationships. And it's funny because the power imbalance. I've seen that it's changed. Even with my clients, that I have, I've seen when they come to me and they talk about, like, when they've been in relationships, especially for 20 years, they've had things up and down in the relationship, but then you can see the power, how it changes and transfers or switches. And that means, so in the early beginning, maybe the male might have been the person who has the perceived power in the relationship. But then as he gets older, what have you, it starts to transfer, you know? And then, it's so weird. I've just seen it. It doesn't apply to everyone, but I've seen that dynamic where there's a power imbalance and it transfers to and fro in the relationship. But a lot of times it just goes from one rate to the other. And that's just the way it is. It's the way it ends up. And sometimes that person could be resenting you all along, and they're just lying in wait for you, to be more vulnerable. Who knows? But the point is, it does transfer. You'll see it happen. You'll also see people carrying on about unfulfilled desires in the relationships. I mean, many relationships, they all start off sweet, right? Wonderful, fantastic, right? And on both sides, as time goes on, things start to fade slowly through time. And if you're the person that feels that your partner is not doing their fair share, or giving enough to the relationship, you know, as you expect them to give, you could become disgruntled and not like them. Maybe you don't find the person's paying attention to you. They're not even giving you any attention. You're begging for it. You're going out of your way to get the attention. Doesn't matter what you're doing, but your desires and expectations, they've changed. The relationship is not what it used to be, and that could make people upset. What do people often say? How come we can't be the way we used to be? Well, if you're not working on it, and you feel that if the work that you did do, nothing's going right, then you're going to resent that person because they're not, or you're not, living up to the relationship that was expected, that you may have had for the first 4 years or 3 years. Now it just seems blah to, right? And there seems to be no commitment. So that really gets into the resentment stage, right? And people can be petty. They could hold on to grudges as well. Forgiveness is hard. They say people who are strong learn how to forgive. The weak really have challenges with it, right? Because it does take a strong person to forgive at times, right? But if you can't forgive and you hold grudges and you can't let go for people who make mistakes, it causes some serious resentment. And you could see it in people who keep harping on the same thing. And the person who holds the grudges, right, over the other person who makes mistakes, right? And you've seen it yourself where they make you feel guilty about it, and you show your partner how much you resent them, right, by making them feel bad, and you're not supportive in any way. And I don't know, there's just something in you that just can't forgive, right? You just somehow it could have been something you experienced when you were younger where things have gotten too tough and it's hard for you to forgive and or let go of things, right? You carry on, and we all always, when we get into arguments, we bring in things that you know they they hurt, of course, other people when we say them, and we harp on the one thing because we're holding a grudge. And you can see when you keep having those people keep throwing it back on you, you're like, wow, this person really resents me, like, right? What's going on here? So that's why you got to look at it and identify. But if you know are encountering a partner that just they just keep going on, and any little mistake that you make, they won't let it go, that causes some resentment in you. That's what people argue about and fight about all the time. I mean, if you look at your partner, do you find that they might be holding a grudge against you? I mean, it's very easy for us to get into or be in a relationship, and we just go in that relationship, and we might not be showing the other person the appreciation that they deserve, right? And we tend to, take that person for granted. We don't notice what they're doing. We're not noticing the efforts, even in their everyday work. And this could lead to an accumulation of negative emotions, you know. And once you start feeling that the other person is not grateful enough, then you start to resent them, right? You got to appreciate the efforts of the others. So just if you're not appreciating the efforts, they're going to resent you and vice versa. It's important to know. You have to be very aware of how resentment can impact us because there are some real consequences that happen because of this resentment that could be going on. I mean, just when people put distance between each other, it leads to increasing misunderstandings, right? Instead of getting along, right, and compromising, insults occur, accusations, right? You're just emotionally, you're not connected, and the distance increases, and you become detached. See, you cannot neglect these feelings of resentment because it causes too much hurt and pain in yourself. These negative feelings of dissatisfaction impact your confidence, your mental ability, your emotional state. And through time, you become a less positive person and you're not as productive, right? Things start dialing down. You start to lose your energy. You become drained. You have unresolved resentment and higher levels of dissatisfaction and discontent. And it becomes irreparable over time. It's a very common theme in relationships. Once you start resenting each other, the level of trust is affected dramatically. You get into these squabbles, and it becomes apparent that you don't trust each other. And you're at a point where you don't feel that you can rely on that person. So you are not as committed towards that person because you don't think that you can depend on them. And you actually expect less of that person. And you give less of yourself in that relationship because the trust and commitment has deteriorated, right? It takes time, but the trust, once that's gone, and your commitment to the relationship, and you don't feel that you could talk to that person and go to them in times of need, you're not going to be invested in that relationship anymore. You checked out. You moved on. There's no need to go there. That door's locked. You're going to an address that you've been given the wrong address because you don't know where you are from there. Because once the trust is there, that's very big. The trust and the commitment, oh, that's so big. Because then you go right into I'm not sure this thing's going to work anymore. I'm wondering if it's even worth me sticking around here. You start to feel lonely, right? And even if you're in the same space with that partner, and no matter what is going on, right? You start to think the big S, separation. Resentment is at its highest peak, and it seems almost impossible, if not impossible, to deal with. So you start to bail. You lost the trust and the commitment. You start to change your mind. You don't think the relationship's salvageable. So you start giving up on the relationship. You checked out. So the only thing to do is to start to figure out how can you deal with this resentment? What are ways that I can actually get this thing under control? And the only way to get some control is first you got to start from identifying the real issue. Is it your partner? Let's find out if it's your partner that's causing this resentment. Is it your partner or is it something else that could be unrelated to this resentment? It could be some external factors. Well, whatever it is, you're going to have to make that decision and identify it, right? Before you start making that other person that focus of resentment. Try to decipher, get some introspective, get some insight into what's going on, right? Identify, work with that first. And then you got to acknowledge what you're feeling and accept that something's not right. The first thing to do, the best thing that you could possibly do, is acknowledge that there is a problem. Like, you can't solve what you don't know ails you. So you have to acknowledge that there's some problem and accept it. And once you accept it, you can start working on it. But you have to acknowledge that there is a problem. And instead of letting it get worse, right, and letting it carry on to a point where it's just non-existent, the relationship, and it's, it's gone so far apart that it can't even, you don't even think there's no possible way. And no, before you get there, you have to say to yourself, wait, I'm going to have to address this issue. I've got to talk. I've got to bring it up. I got to, address this negative feeling that I'm going through. This anger, this distrust, this disappointment, this frustration, and you really have to be real non-accusatory. And this is where statements like, I haven't been feeling well about this. I feel I'm not being listened to. And I statements is a very good way to go about it, right? Do that. Whatever it is. I don't think you're listening to me because I'm having problems with this. Like, you know what I mean? Identify it. Be specific. This is how I'm feeling. This is where I'm getting this feeling. And I'm, right? Like, doing your part, and talk about actions that you're going to take. I want to talk about this, right? Because it's becoming a major problem. Like, there's nothing wrong with being straight up and communicating. However, people might need work to do that. I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with it. It's not easy for all people to do, because it's a lot of times easier said than done. It's just not as easy for a lot of people. So they might need some support in doing that. That's where I'm very big on getting some support. But just know one thing, that acknowledging these feelings and dealing with them and finding a place to start is crucial in dealing with resentment. And you might need support with that, for sure, if you have to. Like, you might have a person who's in a relationship who could be one of the more, extroverts, per se. Very, outgoing, sociable person and likes to talk a lot, whatever. The point is, if you feel that you're not as, as vocal as that person, you might need some help on how to really go about doing it. But sometimes you just got to go for it. You got to be that brave person, because you have to look at it. What's at stake here? This is our relationship I'm talking to. Like, I don't want to. And you got to think about time too. Time is so precious. Like, you got to think about how much work and time it takes. And also think about your pattern of communication when it comes to dealing with issues. Are you an avoider? So you might need some confidence, before you start addressing some of these issues. Put yourself in that positive state of mind, but you might need some real skills on how to approach that person. But you have to make up your mind if you're really ready to deal with the issues. And are you willing to understand that there is a problem and that you want to make some changes? And if you don't make changes in your relationship Bad things are going to happen, like a non-existent relationship. But first, you got to start there, and you have to. I don't care. I always say, people, you have to. You got to find a way to communicate it. Forget dragging it on and carrying on. Work on it and say, this is what's going on. I'm dealing with this. This is a challenge for me, and I'm finding this. Right? And above all else, people, be honest. Right? Don't be one of those people that talks down to people. You know, don't be one of those people that are just so accommodating that they just want to end the relationship, like the arguing, I mean, in a sense, so they want to say what they think the other person wants to hear, so they become condescending, right? You know what I mean? They do. And then, no, be honest, be straight up, right? Acknowledge if you've hurt the person, be gracious, be frank, be straight up, you know. And also, we don't understand a lot about conflict. See, people get nervous and scared when they feel that there's some conflict going on. But believe it or not, just trying to handle some confrontation is very healthy for us. To understand that we are going to have confrontation, and not too many of us actually go and learn strategies and read and understand about confrontation, because it doesn't have to go on and on. Confrontation could be there can be some healthy confrontation if you go about it right. If it's not too long, and then you understand, you set limits in place. Okay, look, I know this is going to create some issues. However, I've got to have these limits there, and this is where I'm going with it, and this is where I'm going to stop. I'm going to stick to it. You know what I mean? And then understand there is going to be some conflict. It might be just temporary, but you have to go through that. It's going to make for a healthier you if you learn to address conflict. If you're constructive with people, in your feedback, right, then that's going to help as well. But over the long run, I think it's very important for a lot of us to learn about conflict, how to work with it, and understand that you can work through some conflict and confrontation, in your relationship, because you will encounter confrontation. But how you approach it is going to make the world of difference, especially if you need to get your messages across. It's something that we don't do, and I think that too many of us need to work on how we communicate and how we deal with difficult situations. And I think it's essential that we learn to handle confrontation, right, and conflict in our relationships. And I think the best way to do that is be honest and say, well, I know this is coming. I'm not going to be rude. I'm going to be clear. I'm going to be straightforward. And if I need to, I'm going to get some help, and I'm going to learn how to deal with it, because this is important to me. And it's actually important to us. But to you, most important, if you're willing to work, because relationships are work. So when it comes to confrontation, understand that there's a part of confrontation that just might have to happen, and it could be controlled confrontation. And simply put, just let the person know why you have this resentment by being very clear. Let them know how their actions or inactions have affected you. And say it straight up with your I statements. I always recommend using I statements. And one thing too is, let's humble ourselves a little bit. Let's do that. Let's learn when we're wrong, we find it hard to apologize. However, resentment happens a lot of the times is because, when mistakes are made, there's a misunderstanding. And when you resent your partner, you cannot be hesitant when it comes to apologizing. It's actually a positive. It shows your strength, as I mentioned earlier, because it takes a lot to apologize. Admitting when you are wrong takes a lot. And when you're not used to apologizing, which most of us aren't, come on, let's be real, many of us aren't. So to get back into the practice, even from listening to the podcast, it's very good for the relationship, being genuine and admitting that you are wrong. You know, it's not healthy to know you're wrong and do nothing about it. You have to be genuine and say you're sorry, right? And be sorry, and it's sorry because you thought about it and you're being genuine. It's right, and you thought and you process it. Yeah, like, you know what? I could have did better. I could be better. I could change a little bit in this time, that I've given you right now. I can acknowledge. But that is so hard for so many people to do. And instead, what do people do? They end up bringing up the past. Oh my goodness. How many of you bring the past to the present? It causes so much conflict. Do not do that. This is one of the major reasons why there's so much resentment, because people, I told you earlier, they cannot get over the hump, and you will not let them. You know it. And if you're that type of person that you keep throwing it at them, right? And, you keep bringing up the past. We do that. Someone in the past relationship, or something that they did last week, or something that you didn't agree with, and you just can't. No, you got to let certain things go. And if you don't, that person, they're not going to be bad. They were like, wait, if you hit me with this past so much, I might as well get into a new relationship. I can't see my way past this. See, the person might have worked their way through it, but then you haven't. And if you keep bringing up the past, there ain't no sense I'm sitting up there with you. You are just a reminder of what they used to do. There was no sense moving on to you. But the truth is, we have to be careful, because there are people out there that get into these relationships and they know, that they stay in those relationships and throw that at you continuously, because that's a power for them. It actually builds their ego because they got something over on you. Be careful. Those are traps. Be careful. Somebody keeps doing that over and over. You got to think about that. How long do you got to live? And how long can you put up with this? And is this person, how long have they been doing it? You got to sit down and look. If you're going to keep throwing this, there ain't no sense being with me. I got a life to live. Just tell them straight. We all make mistakes, but let that person know. See, this is why you don't want it to turn bad, because you know what? People that will do it, and then the thing is, we will tell people to stop and they keep doing it anyways. Well, they see, that's when you got to make up your mind, right? That's when you do. Let them know. No, you can't get past it. There's no sense being. What am I going to do? Live this for the rest of my life? No. So you have to be brave. You got to address it. That's one of the big things. You got to be an advocate for yourself. How much can you tolerate? Are you asking for this resentment? You staying in this relationship when this person can't get past it? Forget trying to get them help. Just tell them, look, if you can't get past it, I can't. Because a lot of people are like saying to themselves, well, maybe I can get them help so that they can get past it. I say let them get their own help. If they want to get past it, they do. But if they're not willing to go for help, they don't want to get past it. You think so? That's my suggestion. My suggestion is no. Let them know clearly where you're at. I don't think you understand. This is getting at me because you're on me all the time about it, and I can't do it anymore. And let them know. Let them know how it's impacted your relationship and your life. You got to connect with your partner. You got to tap into them. You really do. You got to understand. You got to help them sometimes. You got to empathize with them. You got to let them know if they're not feeling good, or if they feel guilty about something that was done, you might have to help them. You have to say things that are going to relieve some of that stress and tension. I hear you telling me that, you didn't really mean it. I hear that. I understand that. So we can get past this. Let's put this behind us. I understand it's a lot for you. Right? Like, listen to them. Try to empathize where they're coming from. If you care about them, try to put yourself in their shoes. Sometimes it's a lot for people to do, but you can do it. And be realistic about what you are expecting. And set your boundaries. Discuss this with them. Talk to them about it. And be reasonable. Right? Be sensible. And try your best to compromise. And make sure that you're sharing the responsibilities. Right? Allow people to participate and understand that, It's not just you. It's not a single person who can run this relationship. It is a partnership. People forget that. Some people want to be in charge and they forget it's a partnership. And say what you mean. Don't tell people you're going to do one thing and then not meet them. If you can't do it, say you can't. See, there's people running around making all kinds of promises and commitments, and see, when they don't meet them, people get resentful, right? You don't keep telling people, because when people can't depend on you, then they start to lose trust. When they start to lose trust, they start to believe in you less, right? So you got to honor your commitments. You got to mean what you say and mean them, right? If you say you're going to be there for them. Because if you're not, right, nobody can be anywhere 100%, but you can always let that person know if something is changing. But when you say what you say, if you mean what you say, and you actually put in good effort, when you do make your mistakes, that person will understand because they know you. But if you're one who's saying a lot and not doing it and not meeting those commitments, and you're being one of those people that your priorities are elsewhere, you're not being genuine, that person will feel it and they'll resent you. And that is a reality, and you have to accept it, right? And you have to learn to understand that there will be times that you can't do things, and even you have to say that. You have to be upfront with. They'll respect you in the end if you're straight with them, rather than carrying on and bringing them through all these trials and tribulations on things that you're not doing. Be real with them and be attracted to them. Physical intimacy in a relationship, it does play a vital role. It could tear down the thickest walls. Just having a physical relationship is not everything for sure, but it plays a very big role. Human touch, right? Even if it's caressing or holding hands, or, you know, bringing each other a little bit closer, having some discussions, you know, after maybe having being very intimate, having some sit down time, agreeing on certain things, taking time out, from some of the problems, right? Actually reinvesting in your relationship. Do things that you used to do when you got together. What's wrong with that? Go certain places, go back, or change it up. Understand that, you can make some changes. But physical intimacy, keep that. Try not to let too much that go. As long as, like I said, the person is understanding that this is something that we should be doing. It's what we both want. Try to keep some sort of contact with them, because once you physically disconnect, then, right, there's a lot that happens from there that's not really good. So trying to maintain some physical intimacy is very important. Equally important is how you say what you need to say, how you phrase things. It's very important. When you tell someone from the blame perspective, the you, right, tell them something real. When they're a decision that you don't agree with them, let them know how it impacts you or how it makes you feel. As opposed to, I don't want you going out because you're going to be with this person. Maybe you could be real. Say, listen, I'm concerned, that you're going to go over there and end up hooking up with Johnny. You know what I mean? You're going to fall in love with the other guy. I'm very concerned about that. And if they don't respond to that, then you don't got anything, right? Or they laugh at you and then it's over anyway. But the point is that tell them, like, men rarely will do that, but could you imagine if they did? There was like, hey, I feel that you going out there to that bar where all them men are, that is making me feel vulnerable inside. Like, most men do not do that, but I'm asking you to at least, sounds good anyways. I think it sounds great. But the point is that it's not easy for people to do, right? But if it's just you and them, you got to still say it. If you want it to work, you say, hey, babe, I'm jealous. I'm jealous of you going out with those guys. I know it sounds corny, but could you imagine? She might go, oh my goodness, really, babe? There's nothing to worry about. And you're fine. But most men are not going to say, I'm jealous, right? I'm really concerned. Like, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not feeling good about it, baby. Don't go. Right? A lot of men won't ever do that, but some of them might. They might figure, and it would surprise you. When I say a lot of men, I shouldn't say that because the men are like they do in private with their partners or whatever. Right? They will say certain things. You wouldn't even believe certain ones will say. You know what I mean? Because when they're more vulnerable, they're gonna say some things that'll blow you away. And the funny thing is, women sometimes will look at that and they'll go, I don't like what I'm seeing. You're acting too vulnerable. And it's funny because that's where we get into this you still gotta act like a man thing. And even women get on the stereotype, right? Where they're like, you gotta act a certain way, man. You can't be too. See, this is what I don't like about you. And we can't win. So the point is that I still have to say, be as real as you can, be as genuine as you can. But I was exaggerating when I said that. But try to be as real when you're talking about something that concerns you. Just give them your true impression and feelings. I was making fun there, but it's important to note that there are people out there that have to say what's on their mind. That you might have to take the hit initially rather than go through all the running around in a relationship turmoil. Essentially, we have to just believe in the relationship and understand that when you're dealing with resentment, you have to really be patient and not give up. Try to understand that it took time to get there, and it's going to take some time to get that person or yourself to switch or make some adjustments and some changes to the relationship. Because patience is key. And love is also key. Show your love. Reassure that person that you're there for them and support them. Pay attention to them. Talk to them. Show them love and do things for them. Do nice things for people. There's things that you can do in relationships that, it makes a big difference. It could help you turn a corner just by thinking and considering that person and loving that person and considering them enough that you're going to be there for them and you're going to show them that it's important that you value and appreciate them as individuals and you want to work things out or you want things to get better. But you do understand that when bumps come along and mistakes are made, you are going to be patient. You're going to understand that it's going to be worth it when you are patient and loving and you show that love. And you do not get upset if the person's not reciprocating right away. See, that causes a lot of problems in relationships. See, people do some bad things in the relationships, and when the person doesn't recover or show them the responses that they want, then they start to resent them. Oh, see, look, I've done all these nice things for you, and I'm trying, and you're not even noticing it, and you said you're gonna, and you keep making. No, that behavior is not going to work at all. And that's why it takes work. And see, I always go back to counseling a lot because I think that when you do encounter major issues, even in your friendships and your relationships, I think it's so important every once in a while to step out. Like it's almost like you're looking from the outside in. So when you're dealing with a professional, you can reflect, right, on what's going on and actually make those adjustments and actually talk with someone to see without bias, to see how you're doing and how effective it's working and how you're feeling about it without offending the other person. And sometimes I believe that that's a process in itself. And I think if people do that more and put more work into the relationship when they really want it to work, it's beautiful. So that's what I strongly recommend for people, to having that unbiased opinion in your relationship. So I want to say thank you to all my listeners. It's been a wonderful conversation. And I appreciate my listeners. And I want you to be like the wise old bird and spread the word. Take care of yourself, people.